Hello and welcome back to TLDR US. Over the past few days, a series of events surrounding former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn have snowballed into what can only be described as a political and legal train wreck. So in this video, we're going to explore what happened with Flynn in the first place, what's happened in the more recent developments, before moving forward with why Barack Obama is back in the news, and what Obamagate could mean moving forwards. If you like our States with Shoes graphics, then I have some good news for you. We've got some merch featuring pretty much every state that we've designed so far. If you click the link in the description and head to the store, you can find photos of every state available. Then, after clicking on your state, you can use the drop-down menu to choose the products you want and your preferred colour. Find your state and support TLDR by clicking the link in the description. Let's start with some context. Back in 2017, Michael Flynn was questioned by the FBI about a series of phone calls with the Russian ambassador to the US. In these calls, Flynn discussed Russia's vote on an issue at the time, as well as the Kremlin's reaction to US sanctions. At the time of the call, Flynn was the designee to become the National Security Advisor upon the inauguration of Donald Trump. When the FBI questioned Flynn about the contents of the calls, he denied that the subjects of sanctions was discussed. And when it was found out that Vice President Pence was aware of the content of the calls, he maintained that Flynn had told him the same thing, and that the topic of sanctions had not been discussed. Now, spoiler alert, it turns out that Flynn was lying at this point, and that Russian sanctions were indeed discussed in this call. This was very significant, as it meant that Flynn had lied, not only to the public about his contacts with Russia, but also to the administration. And subsequently, he was dismissed by President Trump for his dishonesty. In May of 2017, before he was removed, former Acting Attorney General Sally Yates warned that Flynn could be at risk for Russian blackmail. And given that he was still National Security Advisor at this time, this is more than a bit of an issue. As for how Russia could have blackmailed Flynn, it basically comes down to the Logan Act, a 1799 law barring private citizens from meddling with official US diplomatic policy. Whether or not this law could be enforced is a matter of debate, but the fact that Flynn did discuss diplomatic policy with the Russian ambassador when he was just a private citizen, and the fact that this debate exists at all, is enough for some to be concerned that Flynn could have been compromised, as Russia did know that Flynn was lying to the public and the administration about the contents of the call. After the truth surfaced in a series of articles and interviews, Flynn admitted to lying to the FBI about the contents of the meetings. He then subsequently promised to cooperate with the Mueller investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. And then Flynn faded into the background as the Mueller investigation took centre stage. But that state of affairs changed a few days ago, when Attorney General Bill Barr instructed the Justice Department to drop the charges against Flynn, sparking significant controversy. And not for the first time in his career as Attorney General, Barr is facing thousands of calls for his resignation from former and current non-partisan Justice Department officials. So what happened, and what did he do to stir up so much anger? In an interview with CBS, Barr justified the call to drop charges, arguing that there was no basis for the investigation into Flynn or his contacts when the investigation took place. Essentially, Barr's argument is that the interview in which Flynn lied to the FBI was immaterial to any counterintelligence investigation, and thus the FBI should never have questioned Flynn on the subject. Furthermore, Barr said that as designated National Security Advisor for the incoming president and as a member of the transition team, Flynn was within his rights to make such a call and described the call as perfectly legitimate. As such, Barr moved to drop the charges against him, which in turn sparked massive amounts of criticism, with many saying that Barr's move doesn't represent a solid legal argument. Perhaps the most notable criticism came from Mary McCord, who wrote a highly critical opinion piece in the New York Times after the Justice Department used an interview with her in the justification for dropping Flynn's charges. In the article, she says that because Barr doesn't even try and argue that Flynn's constitutional rights were violated, the only argument left for Barr is that the investigation into Flynn isn't relevant or material to any counterintelligence threat. But she goes on to argue that this argument doesn't stand up either, saying that the materiality is obvious, Given that the broader investigation was about Russian interference in the election, it's logical that one small part of the investigation would involve interviewing someone who could be under Russian control. Even if you don't think it's likely, merely interviewing him is pretty reasonable. Of course, though, this isn't a view with which Barr was inclined to agree, but it seems that he's going to be getting a fair bit more pushback, as on Tuesday, the judge overseeing the case announced that he'll be allowing briefs to be submitted from third parties to make arguments. And that's where the legal situation currently stands. End of story, end of video, right? Well, perhaps it would have been, but on Saturday, an audio clip came forward of former President Barack Obama speaking to a group of former staffers.
The news over the last 24 hours, I think, has been somewhat downplayed about the Justice Department dropping charges against Michael Flynn. And the fact that there is no precedent that anybody can find for someone who's been charged with perjury just getting off scot-free. That's the kind of stuff where you begin to get worried that basic, not just institutional norms, but our basic understanding of rule of law is at risk.
This made quite a stir, especially after Trump responded by spending a large part of Sunday tweeting about it. Among his tweets was one that simply read Obamagate, and that's when things really hit the fan. Essentially, the claim around Obamagate is that President Obama orchestrated a series of events and investigations meant to discredit the incoming President Trump and previously help Hillary Clinton win the presidency. Let's look into what we know about this theory at the moment. There is evidence of FBI misconduct in the handling of the investigation into Michael Flynn, and according to newly declassified documents, Obama officials, including Biden and President Obama's then Chief of Staff, Dennis McDonough, were involved in the unmasking and specifically naming of Flynn. This might not seem important, but it goes back to the fact that at the time, Flynn was just a US citizen, and as such, his name was not originally known. There's also the issue that then FBI Director James Comey failed to notify the Justice Department before it moved to interview Flynn in 2017. However, these kind of FBI mistakes do not indicate that there was some conspiracy by President Obama against Trump, especially considering the fact that some Democrats also blame Comey for sabotaging Clinton's campaign, suggesting that the FBI weren't exactly on the Democrats' side. Bringing this whole thing full circle, there's also been claims that President Obama even orchestrated the charges against Flynn, which similarly lacks substantial evidentiary support. The whole situation is a legal mess, but in summary of the facts, yes, the FBI probably messed up. And no, Obama probably wasn't trying to sabotage the Trump presidency. Trump's lack of supporting evidence, however, has not stopped him from speculating. He drew attention earlier in the week by accusing his predecessor of committing the biggest political crime in American history by far. When pressed on that, here's what Trump had to say.
In one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected, and it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. But I wish you'd write honestly about it, but unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Crime. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours.
This comment unsurprisingly sparked a fair bit of controversy, with people criticising Trump for not seeming to have any specific crime in mind. And it wasn't just the Democrats distancing themselves from all of this. Senate Republicans have also avoided questions about Obamagate, with most of them deferring to the official investigation and saying that they'd wait to see the facts. One notable exception to this, however, was Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, who, complete with his new beard, held a press conference on Wednesday in which he made the constitutional case for dismissing Flynn's charges. Paul maintains that the FBI had no reason to be listening to Flynn's phone calls on the basis of the FISA court's order. As a result, Senator Paul issued strong criticism of President Obama and his administration, even going as far as accusing them of using the power of their office against a political opponent. Many Republican commentators, however, seemed hesitant to jump on board with Paul and the president here. In an article for the National Review, conservative columnist Andrew McCarthy, despite siding with Trump and Barr on the subject of dropping Flynn's charges, argues that Trump should be more cautious in his accusations against Obama. He specifically asserts that whether Obama knew something about the investigations into Flynn is irrelevant. In his words, there's nothing wrong with President Obama knowing about the counterintelligence investigation. In fact, if the FBI truly believed that a candidate for president was in an espionage conspiracy with the Kremlin, there would be something profoundly wrong if the president was not kept informed. Essentially, what McCarthy is pointing out here is that Obama would face legal trouble only if he was directing the investigation into Flynn for political purposes, not for counterintelligence purposes. The same applies to those around Obama at the time, and yes, we're talking about Joe Biden here. If no evidence shows that the Obama administration and its various officials were looking into Flynn for political reasons, it will become much harder for Trump to mount corruption attacks that he seems to want to wage against Obama and, by extension, Biden. All of that said, we aren't lawyers, and we're only pointing out what more legally inclined people are saying. In the end, who knows what will happen? If this whole saga has taught us anything, it's that these things are, to say the least, quite unpredictable. We'll keep you up to date as this strange series of events continues to unfold, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we post a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers for making videos like this one possible.